Sometimes, the ones who look down on others forget that the tables can turn faster than they ever imagined. This is the story of Amara Williams, a 16-year-old black student who faced humiliation, racism, and cruelty in front of her classmates, only for the truth to explode like thunder, exposing the ugly heart of a teacher who thought she was untouchable. But what that teacher didn't know was that the girl she shamed was about to teach her the biggest lesson of her life.
The story begins on a bright Monday morning at St. Clair's International Academy, one of the most prestigious private schools in the city. It was the kind of school where students arrived in shiny cars, where parents donated thousands for upgrades, and where appearances meant everything. That morning, a new student walked through the glass doors, Amara Williams. She wasn't dressed in designer sneakers or gold bracelets. Her backpack was simple, her hair neatly braided, and her eyes full of quiet confidence. But that confidence would be tested the moment she stepped into room 204, the English literature class of Mrs. Ellen Crawford, a woman known for her strictness and her subtle prejudice. Mrs. Crawford looked up from her desk, her glasses hanging low on her nose. "Class," she said sharply, "we have a new student joining us today. Let's all give a warm welcome to Amara." The word warm sounded forced. And when Amara smiled and introduced herself, Mrs. Crawford didn't even look up. Instead, she said coldly, "Let's hope you can keep up, dear. Our standards are quite high here. Not everyone fits in." The class went silent. A few students exchanged awkward looks, and Amara's smile slowly faded. But she didn't respond. She just nodded politely and took her seat, near the back of the room. Little did anyone know, that moment would be the first spark in a fire that would soon burn through the entire school. Days turned into weeks, and every class with Mrs. Crawford felt like walking into a storm. If Amara gave a wrong answer, the teacher would sigh dramatically. If Amara asked a question, she'd respond with sarcasm. And if Amara did well, Mrs. Crawford would say, "Not bad for someone like you." At first, Amara tried to ignore it. She told herself, "Focus on your goals, not the noise." But the comments grew louder, bolder, crueler. One afternoon, during a class debate about Shakespeare's view of class and race, Mrs. Crawford asked, "So, Amara, tell us, what do you think Shakespeare meant when he wrote about the quality of mercy?" Amara stood up confidently, ready to answer. But before she could speak, Mrs. Crawford smirked and added, "Oh, wait, maybe that's too advanced for you. Let's ask someone who actually reads the book." The room went silent. Amara's heart sunk. Her cheeks burned with humiliation. She clenched her fists, but said nothing. Then Mrs. Crawford continued, her voice dripping with mockery. "You see, class, this is why preparation matters. Some students come here thinking this is a public school. But St. Clair's demands excellence, not excuses." A few students laughed nervously. Amara sat down slowly, eyes glistening. The insult cut deep. But she didn't know someone else was watching, quietly, from the doorway. Someone who would remember every single word of that moment. In the days that followed, Mrs. Crawford's behavior only got worse. She would purposely skip grading Amara's assignments. She'd give her detention for talking, even when she hadn't said a word. And she'd often remind her, "Your attitude might work elsewhere, but here we have standards." But Amara stayed calm. Even when her classmates whispered, even when she cried at home, she never broke. What no one realized was that Amara's presence at St. Clair's wasn't a coincidence. Her mother, Mrs. Victoria Williams, had recently returned from living overseas. A successful businesswoman and philanthropist, she had quietly acquired a controlling stake in St. Clair's after its previous owner retired. But she wanted to keep it private, to observe the school culture, the teachers, the system. So she enrolled her daughter without revealing her identity. She wanted to see what kind of environment her child and children like her would face. And what she discovered through Amara's experience would shock her to her core. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon when everything came crashing down. The class was preparing for a poetry recital, a big event attended by parents, teachers, and even the school board. Amara had chosen to recite Maya Angelou's "Still I Rise." It was her favorite poem, a message of strength, resilience, and dignity. But when she told Mrs. Crawford her choice, the teacher laughed. "Still I rise, really?" she sneered. "How predictable. You people always—" Amara froze. She wasn't sure she'd heard correctly. But the teacher continued. "Try something else, dear. We want variety, not a racial protest." The class went dead silent. Even the students who'd laughed before now looked uneasy. But Amara held her ground. She said softly, "Ma'am, I'd like to stick with it. It means something to me." Mrs. Crawford's face hardened. Her voice rose. "Meaning, you're here to follow instructions, not express feelings. I'm the teacher, not you." Then, in front of everyone, she snatched Amara's paper and tore it in half. The sound of ripping paper echoed through the room like thunder. Amara's lips trembled, her eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. She stood there, frozen, humiliated, broken. And that's when the door opened. A voice, calm but commanding, said, "Is this how you speak to your students, Mrs. Crawford?" Everyone turned. It was Mrs. Victoria Williams, standing tall in a dark blue suit, eyes cold with authority. Mrs. Crawford's face drained of color. "Oh, Mrs. Williams, I didn't know you were here today. I was just—" But Mrs. Williams raised a hand. "No need to explain," she said quietly. "I heard enough." The room was thick with tension. Every student could feel something powerful was about to happen. Mrs. Williams turned to her daughter. "Amara, sweetheart, are you okay?" Amara nodded slowly, her voice small. "Yes, Mom." The word "Mom" hit the room like an explosion. Gasps echoed. Mrs. Crawford's jaw dropped. "Wait, Mom?" she stammered. "You mean—" Mrs. Williams turned to the class and said calmly, "I am the new owner and chairwoman of St. Clair's Academy. I wanted to see firsthand what kind of education this school was offering and how it treated its students, all of its students." Then she looked at Mrs. Crawford directly, coldly. "And now I know." Mrs. Crawford's face turned pale. She tried to smile. "Oh, Mrs. Williams, I assure you, there's been some misunderstanding." But Mrs. Williams stepped closer. "No, there hasn't," she said, her voice firm. "I heard every word. The humiliation, the bias, the disrespect. You didn't just insult my daughter.
You insulted every child who's ever been told they don't belong." Mrs. Crawford's lip quivered. I didn't mean it like that." Mrs. Williams cut her off. "You meant exactly what you said. And now you'll face the consequences."
Word spread through the school like wildfire. By the next morning, everyone knew Mrs. Crawford had been suspended indefinitely pending investigation. The administration held an emergency meeting led by none other than Mrs. Williams herself. She addressed the entire staff and student body in the auditorium. This school was built on the idea of excellence, but excellence means nothing if it isn't rooted in respect. No child, I repeat, no child, will ever be made to feel lesser because of the color of their skin, their background, or their story. Not here. Not under my watch. Amara watched from her seat, holding back tears. The same students who had once laughed at her were now looking at her differently, with admiration, even guilt. Later that day, Mrs. Crawford was escorted out of the building. As she passed Amara in the hallway, their eyes met. No words were spoken, but the silence said everything. Power had shifted. The one who had been mocked now stood tall, and the one who had mocked now walked away in shame.
In the weeks that followed, Mrs. Williams implemented major changes at St. Clair's. Mandatory diversity training, open-door student support, anonymous reporting for discrimination, and a scholarship program for underprivileged students. The school that once whispered behind closed doors began to listen instead, and slowly, the atmosphere changed. But Amara, she didn't seek revenge. She didn't boast or gloat. She simply went back to class doing what she came to do, learn. During the next assembly, she was invited to recite the very poem Mrs. Crawford had torn apart. And this time, when she stood on that, "You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may tread me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I rise." The audience erupted in applause. Students stood up, teachers cheered, even some cried. And from the front row, Mrs. Williams watched, tears in her eyes, as her daughter reclaimed her voice.
People often think power is about titles, money, or control. But the truth is, real power lies in integrity, in courage, in the ability to rise above hate without letting it define you. Mrs. Crawford lost her job, her reputation, and the illusion that she could treat others like they were beneath her. But Amara, she gained something far greater. She found her strength, her dignity, and her purpose. And in the end, the very school that once made her feel small now celebrated her as. So, the next time you think someone doesn't belong, remember Amara Williams. Remember that kindness costs nothing, and that justice always finds its way. Because sometimes the most powerful lesson is the one taught by the student to the teacher.
Prejudice blinds, but truth opens eyes. Respect everyone, not because of who they are to the world, but because of who they are as a human being. If this story moved you, share it, because someone out there needs to be reminded that no one is lesser, and no voice deserves to be silenced.
If you believe in truth, justice, and storytelling to inspire change, you're in the right place.
Please be part of our community for more exclusive and insightful contents like this on these pertinent topics.